everybody. Welcome to our Deadwood coverage. Right now we're up to episode 5 of the first season. It's called The Trial of Jack McCall. In this episode, Swearingen turns the gem into a courtroom as Deadwood is forced to make its own laws to try a murderer. With Jane on a bender, Trixie is enlisted by Swearingen to help Alma with the Mets child and to keep her pliable to his purposes. Doc Cochran fears Cramid's illness might threaten the camp. Bullock decides to take the law into his own hands. So, we're going to be talking about the ramifications and the outcome of the Wild Bill Hickok murder. We're going to be talking about the continued collision of civilization and frontier values, I suppose. And I'm going to open it up with the quote from Al here. It's his sort of pseudo monologue about vipers.
I'm saying, I had a vision. It had happened. My second of the day. First come when I was watching you and them lawyers online this morning. They began to slither in my sight like vipers. So as not to puke, I had to close my eyes. The vision went on. Got worse. I saw the vipers in the big nest in Washington. They were taking us in the camp for acting like we could set our own laws up, our organizations. And then I saw the big vipers decide to strangle and swallow us up and every fucking thing we gained here. It was horrible. How could we fucking avoid it? How could we let the vipers in the big nest know that we didn't want to cause any fucking trouble?
And that's when you had your second vision.
Yeah, the cutthroats and the pigs, but who wants all that blood spilled, Judge, huh?
So I think this episode is actually kind of an inverse of the stuff that we've been seeing to this point, where if it hasn't been portrayed as a positive, the sort of march toward civilization is shown as something that brings a lot of good to it, and there's a lot of sort of trust built into those institutions, and there's a lot of coming together, and a lot of everyone can become a greater than the sum of their parts, or whatever that expression is. The idea that the town in developing into its own thing is sort of moving away from the frontier values that Wild Bill was espousing, and that resulted in his murder in the last episode. It's now, in this episode, kind of flipped on its ear a little bit. It's shown that the trial process is not something that the town necessarily wants to undertake. And it also shows the kind of corruption that can go on in those institutions. And in a way, I think what the episode is kind of saying is that it's showing that the older human values of like interpersonal relationships and friendship and loyalty are superior in, or at least more pure than the kind of trial and institutional courtroom stuff that eventually comes to pass in this episode. The trial is funny because so my understanding is that the whole point of this is that they don't want, while they want a trial to happen because that is kind of the American culture at that point, or like a worldwide culture, I suppose. They want a trial to happen. However, because the town does not legally exist and is not a part of America, the concern is that if they find him guilty and they pass some kind of judgment on Jack McCall, the U.S. might view the camp as a sovereign territory instead of something that would be easily annexed by the United States. So Swearingen is out there trying to make a lot of money and trying to claim all this property and trying to set up all these businesses. All the prospectors are out there trying to set up their gold claims. No one wants to lose their property when the eventual annexation comes from the United States and they take over the town and sort of incorporate the town into the U.S. So what they're concerned about is if they start setting up their own laws and doing their own sort of legal business, the U.S. government might see the town as something that is more confrontational than an easy annexation. It might see it as, I think Swearingen refers to it as a sovereign nation that would be considered no better than the Sioux in the eyes of the government and the U.S. government. So there's a lot of technical reasons why they don't want this trial to go through. And it's also difficult in these other trying or like frontier times to get a jury that's not biased against someone for one reason or another. Everyone in that town has probably heard of the murder. Everyone was aware. A lot of people probably saw it. A lot of people have been talking about it. It's impossible for them to get a jury of Hickok's peers or McCall's peers in this case who haven't been compromised by information about the trial. And that also extends to their opinions of Wild Bill, because Wild Bill had enough interaction with some of the town folk to really annoy some of the jurors who would serve on the jury in this episode. And everyone has their own kind of selfish reasons for why they would not want McCall to be declared guilty of this. Whether or not it's a technical thing where they are concerned about the future of the camp, or it's a personal vendetta that Hickok had wronged them, or that they like McCall, or that it's some combination of those two things. So the trial itself is portrayed as kind of slimy. The defense lawyer is portrayed as very slimy. The prosecuting attorney is kind of portrayed as he's a little bit comical, I guess, over the top would be the case for him. And the show itself, I don't think, really respects the process all that much, or at least it's trying to say that the reason that this process and this court of law thing is flawed is because institutionally it's divorced from any kind of real relationships that would ground you or cause you to have some kind of ethical concern about things. So they play the trial off in the very annoyingly unsatisfying way that a lot of trials end up being, where someone's declared innocent or not guilty at least, and there's overwhelming evidence in to show that. The defense doesn't really come up with a good argument, but because of the way that the legal system works and the sort of personalities that fill the jury and the way that the attorneys are able to sort of portray their narrative or how they take things to happen, very little evidence is presented in this case. You end up with an episode that feels kind of uncertain of the changes of institutional process that are coming to the town. And so on the flip side of that, the show tries to pair off that negativity or that cynical take of the law, the legal aspect, with a lot of character stories that really show people being better than themselves through their relationships with others. So people trying to improve or trying to help each other is the other side of this this coin that they're trying to show. Whether it's Solstar and Bullock, who have the sort of handshake at the end, even though Bullock is being pretty difficult with everybody at this point. You have Jane and Andy, Jane taking care of the sick guy in the woods. You have Trixie and Alma taking care of the child and taking care of each other to help Alma try to get over her addiction. So it's all, what I think that the show is saying is that those relationships are kind of the bedrock of human interaction with each other, and things become problematic when you start to bring in the civilization forces that on one hand are very good and sort of fair and creates an equal playing field, but on the other hand can be easily exploited and are the institutions themselves have a very cynical take, or at least the writers have a very cynical take on the institutions. And I think it's nice. I think it's a good pairing, and it's kind of flipped what the Deadwood show has been about to this point, because as I said, it's previously been sort of the frontier life is coming to an end, and here are the positives of civilization, and everyone seems to be moving towards it. This one takes puts the brakes on that a little bit, slows it down, and makes you wonder whether or not the institutions that come in are as sort of pure as the relationships themselves between characters who exist outside of them at that point. And I think it's good. I think it's a neat little episode. I like it has a nice dramatic visceral thing to Jack McCall getting off on this because he's such an unlikable character. It has the Bullock, highlights the Bullock character where he's not going to stand for this. And I think it's all very good. We'll wrap up with another quote. This is EB, and then I'll give my sort of final thoughts about that.
You have been tested, Al Swearingen, and your deepest purposes proved. There's gold on the woman's claim. You might as well have shouted it from the rooftops. That's why I'm jumping through hoops to get it back. Thorough as I fleeced the fool she married, I will fleece his widow, too. Using loyal associates like Eustace Bailey Farnham as my go-betweens and dupes. To explain why I want her bought out, I'll make a pretext of my fear of the Pinkertons. I'll throw Farnham a token fee. Why should I reward EB with some small fractional participation in the claim, or let him even lay by a little security and source of continuing income for his declining years. What's he ever done for me? Except let me terrify him every goddamn day of his life till the idea of bowel regularity is a full-on fucking hope.
It's an episode of Monologues. This is the first episode where I noticed that there were extended monologues for both Al when he's talking about the Vipers, and this is an even more extended monologue where E.B., played by William Sanderson, is doing a monologue while he's cleaning the floor and complaining about how he's treated and how Al doesn't really respect him or anything, and he's sort of been set up, and this is his lot in life to clean up the blood stains on the floor from other people's messes. Sanderson, apparently, the reason you'll as we go through the series, you'll notice that E.B. gets a lot of these monologues. Apparently, William Sanderson is kind of a nervous actor, and he used to hate having to memorize these long monologues, and Milch, I guess, sort of thought that was funny and would write them for him frequently as sort of like a way to torture him a little bit. He's very good at it, so it's not like it's that they're wasting their time by doing it and giving it to someone who can't handle the material. But you do notice that E.B. gets a lot of these, and I think that Sanderson is really excellent at these monologues. They're really, really strong. He's really good at portraying this character. I love the character of E.B. I think he's such a slimy guy, yet you can still sort of feel something for him. You kind of feel bad as if he doesn't really deserve the position he's in, even though he's constantly trying to improve this position and become closer to Al and more like Al. And you don't really get the sense that his head or his heart are ever completely into it. But he's such a slimy character, and I think he's really well portrayed, and I like this monologue. That's it. That's the trial of Jack McCall. A good episode. It's kind of a come down episode after the previous one, which was Here Was a Man, where Hickok got killed. This is more dealing with the ramifications of that and showing how far Bullock is willing to sacrifice his sort of the way that Bullock sees honor is overriding everything else in his life. Even though the hardware business is becoming successful and everything, he is not above the honor aspect and like trying to live the life that he thinks is right, and here it's avenging Hickok. And outside that, it's comparing the institution of the court system with the sort of pure nature of friendship and humans helping humans outside of that system. And the show seems to definitely believe that one is at least a more pure and optimistic route than the other one. That's it. Thanks very much for listening, guys. Hope you enjoyed it. We'll be back in a couple days with the next episode, which I think is Plague. And until then, have a good one.